There it is.
There it is. All right, guys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Blue Crocus Experience. Today I'm joined by Matt Tabor, and we're going to chat about a bunch of different stuff. As I talked about in the live video here on Facebook and YouTube, as it's live and as we're rolling, he's got a apparel company and a bit of a story behind that. He's got a story as a person, a really interesting story to chat some about that. He's writing a book. There's a lot to chat about. So Matt, I'm super excited to have you on the show today.
Hey, man, I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, any chance I can get, I'm all for it.
I love it. I love it. So maybe give the audience a little bit of a feel for who you are, where you're from, what you do, all that good stuff, and whatever you miss, I'll pull out in questions later. But just give people a little bit of an idea of who Matt is.
Yeah. Well, so above all, I try to be a good Christian man. I'm 43. I'm married for the second try. I got two daughters of my own, two bonus daughters. Yeah, house full of women, couple boy dogs. Try to even it out. Yeah, just a working man. I really don't know how to answer that.
I love
There
it.
there are a lot of things, but
It's
um,
hard. It's hard to when someone poses that question. It's hard to kind of distill it down into this is who you are because
yeah,
we're all so multifaceted, right? And
yeah,
depending on the audience, we kind of change our story depending on who the audience is, right?
yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting. I love the boy dogs.
Well, yeah, I get that a lot. So I spoke at a leadership conference a couple weeks ago in North Carolina, and that was one of the questions. They come out and they prompt you with different questions, and they were like, "How long have you been married? How many kids do you have?" And so, I'm in a house with four daughters, anywhere from 11 to 17, and then I'm married. And they're like, "Surely you have a boy dog, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." So
I love it. They helped you round out your script a little. So
yeah.
where are you located and give us an idea. You mentioned working man there, which we're going to tie into a bit as we
Mhm.
go through here with your apparel company. But where are you located and give us an idea of what it is that you do.
So home base is a little town in southern Indiana called Salem. Um, Born and raised here. There was a period where during travel for work, that I kind of moved around. I lived in Texas for a couple years. I lived in North Carolina for a couple years. But when it's all said and done, this has always kind of been home.
Cool.
Um, I work for a company right now called Barnhart Crane and Rigging, and primarily we build wind turbines. Barnhart is kind of a crane, heavy haul, heavy lift company, but the division that I'm with, we focus pretty much on wind turbines, erection, and maintenance. Um, my role with them is to train. I train people for rescue. Um, when you've got a wind turbine 350 feet tall, you have to kind of prepare for the worst case scenario. Maybe somebody fell off or something like that. So there's a lot of EMT. There's a lot of uh, maybe they fell and they were tied off, but now they're hanging. So we got to figure out how to get them down. So my role is to travel around and train people on how to do those rescues. Um, and it's challenging a lot, but I love it. Um, every time that I do a training, I'm teaching people things they've never learned before, and even if they've been in it for 20 years, they still take away something and are like, "Holy cow, I never thought about that." So it's kind of eye opening for a lot of them, but it's good. I love doing what I do.
Cool. Have you ever been like obviously you go through scenarios all the time.
Mhm.
You're stay on top of scenarios in the industry to make sure that everyone's up on those precedents, right? But have you actually been live in the field doing rescues before?
One time, it turned out okay, but yeah, one time we were working in New York, and it was the middle of winter, upstate New York. It was about 20 below zero. And we had a guy just transfer to the job, and he came from Texas where it was 80, 90 degrees. And he came up there and he tried to keep up with the guys that had been there for a long time, and his body had not acclimated, and so he got a little bit of overexposure, a little bit of just cold weather exposure. No frostbite or anything like that, but we had to get him down. He blacked out. I don't know, somewhere around 200 feet up, and so yeah, we had to get him down. But he was okay. We got him to a warm truck, got him to a warm vehicle, and took him to the hospital. Everything was okay, but could have been way worse.
Yeah, no, that's the cold's a bit of a shock to the system if you're
Yeah,
not used to it.
yeah, for
You
sure.
know, being from Canada, it's we have no choice but to survive. And
Yeah,
you'd have similar weather as we would, but yeah, no, definitely different than Texas for sure.
yeah.
So
Well, it was a shock to the system.
yeah, no, exactly. So how long, like, you're doing this now, and what we're kind of leading up to here, and what I'd like to talk at length about is your brand, your apparel brand, blue collar
Gear.
Yeah, I don't know, just blanked out there for a second. Blue collar gear, and talk about that and where it came from, but give us some background too before the current job, where you came from. Like, has blue collar always been in your blood? I've seen the passion you have for the industry, the passion you have for the brand, obviously, but just give people some idea of that part of it.
Yeah. So to answer the question, yeah, that's kind of always been where I came from. When I came out of high school, I went straight to a machine shop. That was my first job, and I did really well there. But then I transitioned into residential construction. I got my general contractor's license. I started out building houses. Well, I started out, going into a home and doing trim and putting cabinets in and stuff like that. And the more that I was involved, the more people said, "Hey, while you're here, can you also do this?" And one thing kind of led to another. So I grew pretty steadily into residential construction, general contracting, some commercial work. We built out a doctor's office at one time. That was probably my biggest job. And then came along the drugs. At some point in there, I got pretty spiraling out of control, I guess you could say, and that took a pretty deep turn for the worst. And I ended up losing my business, lost the house, lost the wife, lost pretty much
because of the drugs.
Because of the drugs.
Yep.
And for about a year, I was completely out of work. And then finally, I took another job. That's when I moved to Texas, and got into industrial construction and refineries, power plants, chemical plants, things like that. I got pretty heavily involved with that. And then when COVID hit, everything pretty well shut down. I lost my job. And I kind of lucked into the position that I'm in now with the crane and rigging company. And yeah, kind of took off with that. So it's always been kind of in my blood. It's always kind of been what we do. There's just been points in my life where I had to pivot and maybe take a different path, but it's still always been very much working class, very blue collar. You mentioned the apparel company. There are a lot of print on demand places, and there are a lot of print on demand apparel companies out there, and we kind of pride ourselves on we're the mom and pop place that. I mean, we still print in the garage. We've got a two car garage here that we do all the printing, packing, shipping, everything from. Would I love to expand? Absolutely, but I never want to lose touch with that home feel of things.
Yeah, no, it's I got a couple shirts from you. One I gave to my brother, he loves it. The other one, I believe the kids have it.
Yeah.
They've gone on a tear now. They want
Yeah.
to wear our shirts around.
Yeah.
But yeah, great clothing and a great message. If you guys aren't in Matt's group, jump into the group. He's always dropping some value bombs in there. It's a growing collective of people who are blue collar, right? That's
Mhm.
the lifeblood of America, the lifeblood of Canada, North America,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of good guys and girls in there and the group is always growing. So the
Yeah.
apparel's a cool part of it, but then the group that you're building is awesome as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the apparel is just kind of the vessel for a much larger picture.
yeah,
Um, it's kind of evolved over the past year. We launched about a year ago, and the message has definitely evolved since then. And I can only imagine it will continue to evolve. Um, but like within the group, uh, there are people all over the country. Somebody in California, they understand what blue collar is, but they may not know what what it's like in New York or what it's like in Canada. Um, people all over the country have different scopes of work,
yeah,
and kind of the idea with the group was to bring those people together and connect people, right?
yeah. No, and it's cool, and it's doing that. We've got Steve's just jumped in. Great to
Yeah,
see you, Steve. Appreciate you dropping by. Steve's got a junk removal company, and he just built a crane that he put on the back of his truck, and he's kind of becoming famous in the communities for his little crane
yeah,
that lifts, basically just takes some of the manual part of lifting heavy
yeah,
stuff into the truck. So it's cool.
yeah,
Appreciate you being here, Steve. And anyone else who's watching, or if you're watching on the replay, just drop a comment. We'd love to interact with you as we're live, and feel free to ask questions of Matt or I as well. So
yeah.
I do want to talk because I've recently seen you joined Ryan Stewman's closer contest,
Hmm.
and you shared quite a moving story there with your daughters in the car, kind of sharing the evolution of Matt as a person, as a human, as a father. I would like to dig a little bit more into who was Matt before, as a GC, who were you there? What was it like looking back that that drugs kind of came in and became a part of your life, and then what was it like as you started to come out of that? Because a lot of times, like, we all have addictions, whether they're drugs or social media or porn
Yeah.
or whatever the case may be. What I've learned at least as I've started working on myself, is we all have addictions,
Hmm.
and they just take different forms, and it's trying to fill a void is oftentimes what it is. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Um, yeah. So the drugs kind of came around. I guess the first time I ever did anything, I was maybe late teens. Was still in school, and I never really liked pot. Pot was never my speed. I liked going fast, so I yeah, it just wasn't my thing. But the first time that I tried pain pills, um, that really stuck. The feeling with pain pills that everybody else kind of hates, I really enjoyed,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
uh, and I have always had kind of an addictive personality, so it stuck with me. And what kind of started out as, hey, when I would run into a buddy that had a pain pill, I'd grab one. Kind of slowly led into, I'm spending a couple $100s a week looking
yeah,
for this stuff, and trying to trying to find different suppliers and vendors, to take care of my habit, and that kind of grew into cocaine. I liked cocaine. That was a rich man's drug, and um, when I first got into construction, I worked for a guy that trimmed houses, and I thought, this guy really has his crap together and got a good business. He's thriving, got good money. He's got a motorcycle. He's got cars. And I kind of leaned into him as almost like a mentor.
yeah,
And, he taught me how to do some business. And then we did a home and garden show in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was kind of like the who's who of shows. And after the show, we all went out to dinner. And at dinner, he was like, we're all sitting around a table, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go powder my nose if you want to join me." And I was really, at the time, I was pretty naive. And I was like, that's weird. What's wrong with you? Because I'm thinking of like my daughters going to the bathroom together or something. And so I'm like, okay. So we get up and we go to the bathroom, and he locks the door. And I'm like, now I've seen the movies. I know you're locking the door. Either I'm going to get beat up or something's going on. And so yeah, he pulled out some cocaine, and at the time I was pretty disappointed. And
Like with the delivery of it.
yeah, with the delivery of it and how it went, because I didn't know that about him. I had never done cocaine yet, so that was I was new to that. And so I skipped over the option or the opportunity at that time and didn't do it. But it wasn't it wasn't too much longer that I ended up falling into that. I heard somebody say one time, if you sit in a barber shop 5 days a week, you're eventually going to get a haircut. And that's kind of the way it went for me. I was around it every day, and you would like to say that I've got the willpower or that I'm never going to do that. But when you're around it all the time, you're eventually going to.
It just becomes normal.
Yeah, and it's that whole you're the average of the five people you're around the most. You really do fall into the same things that they do. And Nick, thank you. And so yeah, that led into a lot of different things. And then when I got to where I couldn't afford cocaine anymore because it was just too expensive, then I found meth. And that was, as far as addicts go, that was more bang for the buck and easier to find, cheaper, lasted longer. And when I got into that, that's when I really spiraled. That became a priority over everything else in my life. I ended up losing my marriage. I lost my house. I lost my business. And there were a lot of other contributors in there as well. But when I look back, it was that was a bigger priority to me than anything else. Yeah. And so yeah, I ended up basically losing my kids when I got to a point where I knew I had to either get away and leave, or I was going to end up dead or in jail. And I knew that because that's where most of my friends were ending up. They were overdosing or going to prison. And I knew that wasn't the road that I wanted to go down. I just didn't know how to stop it. And the only thing that I knew was to just leave home. And I thought, if I get away and I don't know anybody, well, then I can't find anything. And that was the plan in my head. But the odd thing about that is you learn to identify people, and even
you start to recognize the yellow cars when you buy a yellow car, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. I moved away. I moved to Texas, 1,000 miles away, and I thought I wouldn't know anybody and it would be easy. But I got down there, and the first friends that I found were the ones that had it, and it's crazy how that works out. So it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. It took about a year of trying to filter out my friends. And, once I realized somebody was this way, they were no longer in my life. But it was hard. It wasn't an easy transition. And then a lot of my old friends would constantly, when I would come into town for a visit, hey, stop by when you get in town. Let's, hook up for old time's sake. And it's hard to say no, but you have to be able to see the bigger goal, the bigger picture at the end of the day. And one time in particular, and I think I even talked about this on some of my posts, before I went to Texas, I didn't have any money. I was broke. I had spent it all. And the only thing in my head that I really knew how to do was drugs of some sort. So I thought, I'm going to sell some drugs, get enough gas money to get my butt to Texas, and then everything will solve itself. And the very last drug deal that I ever did went really bad. And the guy came to my house and he refused to pay me. And I was full of hate, full of anger, and I beat him up pretty bad in my house. And when he finally left, he must have took $200 that he owed me and gave it to a local biker gang. And one of those guys came back and found me with a baseball bat. And so I took a baseball bat to the head. I remember one really, really good hit to the back of my head. I still have a good scar. And the next thing I know, I'm covered in blood, and I'm unconscious. Well, the next thing I know, I'm waking up and he's gone. I can only assume that he thought he killed me is the only reason that he left. And yeah, so I was walking back to my house, and as I'm walking back to the house, my youngest daughter at the time tries to video call me. And here I am, a bloody mess. And for the first time and only time in my life, I declined her call on purpose. And that was tough. And that was kind of that moment in my life where it was like, I need to fix this, because I'm not just letting me down. I'm letting my kids down. I've already lost my wife. I've let everybody down around me. And you don't want to do what you do for the other people, but you got to understand that the things that we do don't just affect us.
Mhm.
Even now, clean and sober, the things that I do still affect my family.
Yeah.
And that's a
Positively
tough,
or negatively, right?
right, positive or negative, and that's a tough realization. And that's when you start looking in the mirror and stop blaming other people, man, things change. But for a big part of my life, I was blaming other people for everything that I did, and I had pretty much just accepted that, hey, this is who I am anymore. And if you don't like me while I'm doing drugs, well, maybe the problem's you, maybe. And when I started looking in the mirror and having some accountability for myself and taking responsibility, all of a sudden I was able to fix it. There's is it still a struggle?
Yeah, I was just
No.
reading that as well. Yeah.
No, not really. So there's a meme that I see on Facebook once in a while that's pretty powerful, and it says you don't stop the addiction by just stop using drugs. You stop the addiction by creating a life where it's easier not to use than it is to use. And for me, I had a lot of anger. And you watch that video, the closer contest with my daughters. That's one thing that they mentioned was I was always mad. I was always angry all the time. And even then I asked them, who do you think I was angry at? And they said, yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that they can identify that as, that was 5 years ago. So they were, my oldest one would have been 12 years old at the time. And she can identify that.
What do you think you were angry at?
Me.
Aside from why do you think you were angry at yourself?
For the choices that I was making.
So it was just a compounding effect, snowball, that every choice you made added to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that deep down I knew that it was not just killing me, but I knew that it was tearing my family apart. And that was tough. Yeah. And I hated myself for that. Like I said, I lost my marriage. I lost a very thriving business at the time. And yeah, that makes you angry when you look back and you know that it's because of the choices you made. Yeah, I hated myself.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Nick. And for those who are listening on the podcast, Nick Nick was asking, is it a struggle for you to stay clean? Do you still get cravings, or are you completely separate? And that's what Matt was just answering. So that's a great question, Nick, and good answer.
And I would say too, because he also says, they say once an addict, always an addict. I think I would reflect back to Lewis what you said at the beginning. We're all addicts of some sort. For some people it's gambling. For some people it's shoes. For some it's just social media. Um, but I think that in our minds we classify drugs as a worse addiction because it's outside of the normal uh, what we consider good or bad.
Yeah.
We can scroll Facebook for 5 hours a day, and we know that is an addiction. But since it may or may not negatively impact somebody else's life, we consider that it's okay. It's socially acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's, yeah, I mean, I've, social media was a big one for me, that I've, I still deal with it, but really had to realize that I was escaping into that as a form of dealing with what I was trying to numb, stuff
Yeah.
from my past and whatnot. So it's, we're all running from something often
Yeah.
when addiction sets in, is certainly what I've learned and picked up. I
Yeah.
appreciate you diving into that, because I think the best stories are the most human stories. We can all talk about, oh, you got this awesome apparel company and you're doing awesome, cool stuff with rescue, but the realest stories are the ones where we're just human. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate you sharing that, and they affect me greatly when I hear about them and engage with them. So I appreciate that. When you were, you talk about, you kind of realize, like, you had that phone call with your daughter, or the one that you didn't pick up, and you that kind of hit you in a different way. You separated from your friends as you started to realize that, you really were becoming an average of the 5 people that you were hanging around.
Yeah.
What was it really that was the ultimate catalyst? I guess those were some catalysts, but, like, did you get help? Did you reach out to anybody, or was it just a personal journey that you realized you had to go through?
Um, I had a few friends at the time that, there are two different kinds of friends. There are friends that tell you what you want to hear, and there are friends that tell you what you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of both. Um, but after I'd pretty much lost custody of my kids and was getting ready to go to Texas, well, I had already gone to Texas and I was coming back every once in a while trying to go to court and get custody of my kids back. And I had a couple of those friends that really told me what I needed to hear, and um, reminded me I could leave here and go down there, and it's the same thing if I don't start changing my friends and start changing my habits. Um, so I had a lot of that. The biggest thing for me was I had to start telling the truth, and I, it's easy to say tell the truth, and it's easy to say, well, just don't tell a lie. It took me a long time. I'm 43 years old, and I still struggle with it sometimes to say telling the truth is not just not telling a lie. Like you said, we're all running from something at one point or another. Maybe we've all got a past. When I started telling the truth, when I looked in the mirror, things became different because I started holding myself accountable. And I would like to say that, I went to a 12-step program and that fixed me. I didn't. Uh, Everything that I did on my own with the help of maybe 3 friends total,
Mm-hmm.
that just told me what I needed to hear, told me the truth, um, reminded me that I had been making excuses, uh, and allowing myself too much grace for messing up. Uh, my oldest daughter had pretty well abandoned me. She, I think it became so normalized to her that she just didn't want to be around it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big kick in the face for me. My youngest daughter she's kind of been the one that's right on my side no matter what. I could hurt somebody bad and she would still be right there sticking up for me. But kind of losing contact with my older daughter was a big slap in the face. It was probably about a year-long process to get totally cleaned up, to where I didn't feel like I was struggling anymore. Anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's powerful, and it comes back to the value of friends. I think we need more of those friends that tell us what we need to hear.
Yeah.
We've got social media. There's lots of people that pump you up, and that's how we connected with social media.
Yeah.
So I'm not bashing social media. The Apex group that we're both a part of, that community is largely active on social media with a few in-person meets, but there's a lot of people who pump us up and behind our backs say, Matt's going down the drain, yada yada yada. Lewis is this, so on and so forth. But those people that have the guts to stand up to us and say, hey, we value you as a person. You've got, this needs to change. Something's got to happen. Those are the ones you want to keep close.
Yeah, totally agree.
They hurt in the moment often.
In the moment, but they're coming from a place of love and not a place of selfishness where they're, like you said, trying to build you up over here and tear you down over here.
Yeah. I mean, heck, a lot of people pay for those people. That's what coaches are. People, we're paying for people to tell us what we need to hear, right? So to have those people by your side. So, man, once again, I reiterate, so, walking through that story, I appreciate you going into the depth that you did, because more of that needs to be told. And a little birdie told me that you are writing a book about some of these stories.
I am. So I'm writing a book called The War Within. Kind of dialogues my some of my struggles. I'd like to say that I put them all in there, but people would get bored, I think, if I told all the stories. And it's tough writing a book because you want to not only tell your story, but give people some sort of actionable takeaway that they can implement into their own life. And like we were talking, it's tough because sometimes you don't always know what brought you to where you are. There may or may not have been a light switch that went off. Sometimes it's a culmination of events leading up to something, and you looking back and it's like everything was funneling you here. And kind of like Apex. I mean, we brought that up, and I look back. I've been in a lot of different mastermind groups. None of them really clicked. And looking back, everything kind of funneled towards Apex. And that's, that's not me trying to lift it up. It's just when I left for Texas, everything kind of funneled towards that one event. And it was hard to see in the moment when I was right there. But looking back, it's crazy how, whether you believe in God or not, I believe there is something out there pulling us in a direction.
Yeah.
And I believe God was there watching over me. I believe he kept that guy from killing me. I believe he made my daughter call me and made me decline that call. I believe that there are a lot of things like that put into our life to bring us to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
So
butterfly effects.
Yeah. And the book is kind of, it's kind of where I've been leaning for a while. I just didn't know how to do it. And then again, everything funnels you that direction. When we got into Apex, they all speak very highly of writing your book.
Yeah.
And that's like, holy crap. I wanted to do this for a while and I didn't think it was a good idea. And now this. So yeah. So I would say the book will be finished in a couple of months. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I guess that's a little bit of the addict in me. Um, so I want to make sure it's right. I want to make sure it's valuable uh, to those that read it and take the time and invest in it. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Do you find it a cathartic experience going through and reliving some of those stories and putting them on paper in a way that makes sense to other people? Do you find that the multifaceted way of having to look at that?
Absolutely. You know, so I share a lot on social media. Anybody uh, that follows me knows that I dive pretty deep into the stories there. And not only do the stories help other people, I mean, I get messages, every time I post a really, really vulnerable post, I get messages like, holy cow, man, that struck a nerve with me. So not only is it that, but that's a little bit of accountability for me as well, and therapeutic. Even to this day, I'll be I'll think about something that happened that, like, holy crap, I forgot that. And it's almost like a journal for me.
Yeah,
Um, I just choose to journal publicly, you know.
and help people, right? And
Yeah,
help them, kind of see the stories. No, that's awesome. So, a couple months to write. You think it'll launch, before the end of the year?
I
Be
do.
able to be purchased.
My goal is my birthday is in October, and my goal is to launch on my birthday.
I love it. I love it. Well, we'll have to do a show closer to time. When the launch is coming up, and
Yeah,
you guys are we're chatting with a bestseller right here. He just has to finish the product and then launch it. So this is
yeah,
pretty exciting.
bestseller in the making, right?
Yeah, yeah, awesome, awesome. So then we touched briefly on the apparel line and the group and everything. So
Hmm.
definitely recommend guys get in touch with Matt. Follow what he's
Yeah,
doing. I think you're most active on Facebook, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Facebook. I'll drop a link to his profile and I'll tag you after the fact on Facebook, just so that people can connect with you and
Sure,
connect with what you're doing. I'll drop a link to the group that you've got going, and then we'll pop in your book link too when that goes live. But
man. I certainly appreciate it. Yeah,
of course, no, and appreciate everyone who's listened in here too. This is, I just love listening to the stories and engaging, with the parts that touch my story, and the addiction that I've had, and we continue to work through them, different things, right?
yeah.
Um, as we leave here, what lesson or message would you leave with people? I know it's kind of a spot question, so it doesn't have to be anything crazy profound, but if you've got something that you can leave people with before we sign off, just something to wrap up everything we've chatted about, really.
Um, the biggest thing for me in my life has been to stop looking for perfection and start looking for growth. Um, I think a lot of times we have expectations. We picture in our mind how it should be, and then when we don't quite hit that expectation, all of a sudden we're depressed, and and that's tough because it's hard not to. When we go to the grocery store, we expect them to have what we're looking for. We expect them to have the 3 pound pack of chicken or whatever it is. And then we get there and they don't have it. And then it's like, holy crap, what do we do now? And and it's tough because I think we naturally expect perfection in our own lives, in our relationships, but perfection is rarely achievable, but growth is always achievable. You can any step forward is forward no matter how small the step. And yeah, I don't know, that's a
That's
tough
huge.
question for sure.
No, that's a nugget right there. It's hard to top that. So I think I'm going to leave people with that. Stop chasing perfection. I don't have much to add to that because that's pretty much perfection right there. But Matt, appreciate you coming on. Guys,
Man.
stop chasing perfection, chase growth, chase, being 1% better every day, as a lot of the people I'm surrounded with talk about. But appreciate you sharing your story, brother. Appreciate you being open and vulnerable here live and ultimately in the book when that comes out. And it's just absolute pleasure to chat.
Likewise, sir. Like I said, any opportunity I can get to reach out and help, anybody. If anybody wants to connect with me, shoot me a message, introduce yourself.
Love it.
And if I can help anybody, I always close by saying, if you need help, reach out. If you're struggling, reach out. And if you don't know who to reach out to me. Absolutely.
I appreciate you, man. We'll wrap up here, but guys, reach out. It's reach out to someone. Matt's a wonderful human I've gotten to know, and you're not alone. There's someone to chat with about whatever it is that you're going through. So we'll leave you with that, folks. Appreciate you, Matt. We'll wrap up off air here.
Thank you, sir.